But keep the overall look of these areas from the reference image in mind while adding these lines. I'm using my perfection eraser to soften the edges of these bright highlights where required, and then using my 2H graphite pencil to add depth and to further fine-tune the overall shape of the highlighted areas. I'm also blending the barriers between the darker and highlighted portions using the same 2H pencil. I'm going to repeat the similar process of adding softer highlights in the form of small lines and dots first using my sharp tip mono 0 eraser. And by the way, if you want to learn the basics of drawing first, you can join my course on Udemy. I put my course on sale for 5 days of every month. You can check the link in description to see if the sale is going on right now and get enrolled as soon as possible. Okay, now for the brighter highlights, I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser and adding these extra sharp and white dots or highlights, especially in between and over the previous ones to give the whole skin texture a more 3D and realistic look. So while I was adding these highlights, something silly happened. I forgot to check the brightness of my iPad and went on to add these highlights using mono 0 eraser, which resulted in softer and dull highlights instead of sharp and brighter ones, because I was trying to match the tones of this area with the reference image. So whenever you are using a reference image which is quite dark and has a lot of contrast like this, make sure to keep the brightness of your phone or tablet at a specific level throughout the whole drawing process, so you don't have to readjust the overall tones as I did here. Now moving on to the eyebrow area, and first of all I'm softening some of these darker shadows using my perfection eraser. Then I'm adding the second layer of highlights using my mono 0 eraser with a sharp tip to finalize the overall skin texture in this eyebrow portion. Now for the eyebrow hair, I'm using my sharp tip 5P pencil and adding these small and slightly curved strokes. Notice that the hair are denser and closer together in the starting portion of the eyebrows as compared to the end. So keep that in mind while adding these individual eyebrow hair. Now adding the highlights using my sharp tip mono 0 eraser in between the hair strokes we just added to increase the contrast of these areas and make it look more sharp. For the brighter highlights, you can use your electric eraser if needed. Now moving on to the eye, and I'm going to repeat a similar process of darkening the outline first and then adding a base layer. The only difference here is that I was experimenting in this area and I didn't blended the base layer with a brush. Instead, I directly used the 2H pencil over it to see how it will blend and work over this layer, which made the overall layer look very rough and textured. So to avoid this, you should stick with the typical method of adding base layer first with whichever pencil you prefer and then blending it with a dry brush to achieve smooth base layer for future layers. I'm going to use my mono 0 eraser to add the softer highlights in the eye and skin texture, and for the brighter highlights I'm going to use my electric eraser. For the left cheek portion, firstly I'm darkening the lines of the folds and wrinkles using my 8B pencil, so that these lines don't disappear in the shading and blending process later on. Then adding the base layer using a B pencil and blending it with a medium sized dry brush like this. Now I'm using my 5P pencil, and firstly I will add these small and soft dots, and then I will extend them a little bit up and downwards to create a base for pores and skin texture. They will also help to build up the overall contrast in the cheek portion. I'm going to add these dotted highlights in between and over the darker texture we just added, especially near the nose using my mono 0 eraser. Now in order to lighten some of the darker shadows and to add highlights, I tried using my perfection eraser, but it actually affected the area of the highlights and made it permanently dull. So if you need extra bright highlights anywhere in your drawing, I would suggest you to avoid using a perfection eraser, as it embeds the graphite into the paper texture and it becomes really difficult to remove it later on using any type of eraser. The only solution in that case is to use jelly roll pen, which again we mostly try to avoid in hyper-realistic drawings because it fades away in the preservation process. You can use your perfection eraser on areas where there are soft highlights, as it works amazingly on those areas. Okay, now to add brighter highlights, I'm going to use my electric eraser and further fine-tune the previous highlights to make them look more sharp and shiny. I'm adding these small strokes to mimic the wrinkles and lines to give the skin texture a more realistic look. And with this step, we are done with this first part of this drawing. I will resume this drawing process from the nose in the next part, which is coming out next Saturday. So stay tuned. It takes so much time and efforts to create this tutorial, so please leave a like if you enjoyed this one. It helps me a lot as an artist. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.